everybody. Welcome back to episode 34 of the Mindful of You podcast. This episode is surviving. So, before I jump into today's episode, I just wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to anybody who may be new here and say, welcome, welcome. If you're going to go back to any episodes and listen to those, I would recommend going back to any episode that's labeled Pillars. So I haven't listened to them in a while, and it's been a while since I recorded them. But I remember when I did, they felt very important and like kind of the main messages I wanted to get out to people. So the reason I thought about my pillars that I have in podcast episodes is because I think this episode is going to intertwine a little bit with some of the things that I talk about in those episodes. So I teetered back and forth whether to call this episode Surviving or Survival Mode, and decided they're pretty much interchangeable and no big deal. So I'm going to be referring a lot to what I call survival mode, what I've heard other people call survival mode. So basically what I think of was like, what is survival mode is basically when we are doing the bare minimum to, one, keep ourselves alive, and two, keep the things in our lives functioning that need functioning. So, for example, we're, eating enough food to stay alive, drinking enough water to stay alive, getting enough sleep to stay alive, and accomplishing the amount of work needed to keep our jobs, or getting the homework done that we need to get to pass our classes, but not much beyond that. It doesn't feel like a fun way of living. It's basically what I refer to as just getting through the week or getting through said amount of time. So survival mode can actually be somewhat useful, in my opinion. Survival mode has gotten me through difficult times in my life where I thought, like things are really rough. I can barely hang on, but I did hang on. And I think that as humans, we have an instinct to get what has to be done. And then allowing the rest of it to drop off. So if you're in survival mode right now, kudos to you. You're doing amazing. Keep going. I think it's normal to have times in our lives in which we are in survival mode, and then there's also times where it may be a little abnormal, and in my opinion, should be looked at. So I'm going to talk about 3 seasons of life in which it makes sense for you to be in survival mode. The first one is big transitions. I have talked a lot about transitions on this podcast because I really have struggled in the past more with my mental health during a transition. So usually this was from semester to semester in college. If I was starting new classes or something like that, I was in survival mode and just hanging on, basically, like hanging onto the bumper of the car. Other transitions that were huge for me were one, coming home from my mission. Another was starting to my first serious relationship, which happened to be my husband. And another was graduating college and starting a full-time job. So during each of those big transitions, if you look at the history timeline of Mallory's life, I was in therapy. So no, therapy did not cause survival mode, but I went to therapy because I could sense I was struggling and I needed some additional help to adjust to my new lifestyles. So when I got back from my mission, one, it was unexpected. I was expecting to be gone for 1.5 years, and I was only gone for 7 months. So I needed some help, adjusting to having come home prior to when I anticipated, and also adjusting to like, okay, this is it. This is life, A lot of times post-mission, it's like, okay, now what? And usually the answer is, oh, go to school. Or for some people, get married. And then for some people, have kids. And sometimes things don't follow that pretty timeline we have set up in our heads, and some anxiety can kick in. So I was definitely in survival mode for a good portion of time after my mission. I was like going to class and doing the things I need to do, but not a whole lot beyond getting that stuff done. I was relying heavily on my parents and my family. I needed help. I needed support. Again, I think survival mode helped me here. I was getting adjusted to new medications and things like that. All I needed to do, if I could go back and tell myself, was hang on. Like, that's it. Like, if I could go back and tell myself something, I wouldn't give myself specific advice like I give on this podcast, or like ways to train my brain necessarily. I probably would, because that's who I am. But in reality, I think all I really needed to do was hang on, keep going to therapy, keep trying, and things were going to get better. As far as the transition of my new relationship / marriage goes, I ended up going to therapy because I wasn't used to the, tumultuousness or uncertainty of having a partner or somebody that I didn't know their next move necessarily. So I know my husband really well now, and I feel like we can kind of anticipate how each other's going to react to certain things. But especially in those early days, I was like, I just don't even know what to expect. Like, I just don't know what's going on. I didn't know myself. I didn't know him, like, to the extent of being able to feel grounded in the relationship. So my therapist was able to teach me a lot of techniques to help out with that. And then I also went back to therapy when I graduated and transitioned to my full-time job. And if y'all think like coming back from a mission is like, wow, now it's real life time, graduating college is a very similar feeling. And I've met with a lot of students who are about to graduate or who prevent graduation because they're very nervous about what they're going to do next, especially when they are in fields that don't necessarily have a specific career lined up. For example, like teaching, usually transition just from student teaching into your first teaching job. So it's a little more straightforward. Other students graduate in something like Spanish. I advise for languages, so they might graduate with a degree as simple as Spanish, and they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do. What job do I get? What do I do? And it's very intimidating. It makes sense to me to go into a little bit of survival mode during that time of your first job or searching for your first job. Survival mode makes sense to me there. The second time or season of life that I think it makes sense to be in survival mode is when you experience tragedy or unexpected events. For example, I have a coworker who is going through a divorce. It is not necessarily something she wants, but something that's happening nevertheless. And she's come to talk to me a few times, and you know, you guys know how much I love to give advice or share my thoughts on things. But with her, I tend to just say, just hang on, because honestly, she's not going to feel very good for a while. And I'm sure something like therapy or things could help her process some things. But as far as feeling tip top, life is good, life is what I want it to be, it might be a little while before she feels like that again. Another example I heard, which this would fall into probably a big transition or unexpected events, but on the Anxious Love Coach podcast, Natalie was talking about someone she received advice from because they're trying to start a family, where they basically said, when your kids are first born or when your first kid is first born, your marriage might not feel awesome, and just hang on, you know? And sometimes that's the only advice you need, is just, you know, things will get better. And sometimes just knowing that or believing that and then pushing through the tough days, knowing that the dawn will break, the sun will rise, is okay. You don't necessarily have to like therapize or like coach your way out of it. allowing yourself to be in survival mode during those times is sometimes okay too. Another time of survival mode is busy seasons. During like finals week and stuff, totally, I was always in survival mode of just like eat, sleep, homework, eat, sleep, rehearsal, homework, whatever the order of operations was. And it was like, okay, I just know when said date hits, we're going to be good. I'm going to be feeling way better. So I'm sure you guys have had times of like, if I can just get through Friday, I will be okay. I have a busy season of work, usually the first week of school and the week of registration, pretty crazy. And I might be in survival mode. It really wasn't too bad this past week. I know I talked about it a couple podcasts ago. I was really worried about, the first week of school. It didn't end up being too bad at all. I wouldn't even say I was in survival mode. I was doing pretty well. But if I was, I would have just told myself, it's fine. It's going to end. It's going to end and it's going to be fine. So those are times of life, and I've not listed them all, but those are times of life that I've noticed that I tend to kick on survival mode and just kind of do the bare minimum. So one thing I want to say with that is being okay with yourself doing the bare minimum. If you're in like a big transition or like a time of survival mode, don't expect like extra stuff out of yourself. Like, don't expect to be doing a whole lot of personal development. Don't expect to be eating super healthily or going to the gym consistently. Like, that kind of stuff might fall off your plate to focus on the big thing happening in your life, and you don't need to beat yourself up on that about that. Now, survival mode is not something that's sustainable. It's not something that creates the life that we want to have. In my opinion, it is meant to be a temporary state so that we can get through hard times and then come out of it and rebuild. It is not meant to be our entire lives. Now, for some, they kind of end up stuck in survival mode due to a myriad of circumstances. Many people are without homes or without work or without knowing where their next meal is coming from. And in that case, they are truly in not just an emotional, but a physical survival mode. They're just going to be solving things one step at a time. They're not thinking about their long-term goals. They're thinking about where their next meal is coming from, how they're going to pay rent, how said things is going to happen. To me, that is not a sustainable way to live. And my heart goes out to anybody in that situation. And I would say if you are finding that you are in quote unquote survival mode for a long period of time beyond these transitions or other things you might be able to think of that could be the source of why you're in survival mode, it may be good to look at a lifestyle change if that's something that's within your control. For example, if you're working more hours than are necessary or taking more credits than are necessary, it may be worth looking into lessening your load so that you can have a better quality of life. Also seeking medical attention, going to a doctor, going to a therapist, and seeing if there are changes or things that need to be done so that you can have a higher, better quality of life. Now, I am smart enough to know that these things aren't always in a person's control, especially in the circumstances I mentioned, in which case I would say hold on and grab onto opportunities that present themselves to improve your life day by day. So if you're in survival mode, if you're in one of those hard times right now, my heart goes out to you and I say, hang on, swim for brighter days, and it's going to be okay. Okay, well, that's everything for this week. I really appreciate you guys listening. If you want to, please rate this podcast 5 stars. Send it to your friends if you think they would enjoy it. And yeah, have a wonderful week.